Welcome to another great show right here on IT Pro TV. You're watching the CompTIA IT Fundamentals Show. I'm your host, Ronnie Wong, and today we're diving into, basic security fundamentals. And here, of course, to help us understand all that we need to is going to be Mr. Don Pezet himself. Don, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ronnie. And I'm excited about this episode because we're jumping into a new section here, which is IT security. And boy, of all the topics that we cover in IT Fundamentals, this is probably the one that has the most industry buzz behind it, right? There's a lot of people that are looking to get into IT, and they watch Mr. Robot. They hear about pen testing. They see this exciting side of IT, and that's where they want to get into. Well, a lot of that stuff is just fairly accurate. I mean, that there is this aspect of pen testing going on, but the world of IT security is actually much bigger than that, and it covers a lot of ground. So what we're going to do over the next couple episodes is get a chance to learn a little bit about what IT security is, what it means, all the different things that fall under the umbrella of security, and then learn a little bit about whether or not security is a career field that we want to reach into.
Now, Don, when it comes down to the idea of security, just like what you were saying, everybody has their own perspective on what security should be like. If you and I ask 10 different security professionals, we'll kind of come up with just about 10 different answers when it comes down to it. So if I want to begin to learn more about IT security, what are kind of the basic fundamentals that we have to begin with so that we have at least a setting of the expectations here?
Sure. I think what's important to start with is to understand what the risk is, because IT security wasn't always a thing. It wasn't always something that we worried about. I had a computer in the late 1980s that was it was an IBM PC Junior. I remember it was a great computer. We didn't have a password on it. We didn't have any security features whatsoever. You just turned it on and you used it. That doesn't fly today, right? And the reason it worked back then was that we didn't have networks. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have, I mean, these things existed, but we couldn't afford them. So I didn't have access to all of these things. So when you have just a standalone computer that's in your home that you control, that just has, maybe just have games or word processor on there, there's not much risk. And that's how computing started. That's how the internet began. The internet was a very trusting network in the early days. If you used the internet in the 1990s, most websites were not encrypted. All email was being sent unencrypted. Things were just very trusting. Fast forward to today. Today, there are thousands of malicious actors on the internet right now trying to intercept data, trying to compromise servers, trying to access systems, and just generally do bad stuff. If you get out there on the internet and say, I'm going to be trusting, it's okay, everything's going to be fine. It's not. and within 24 hours, you're going to have a system you can't use anymore because it's been infected by a virus or compromised by ransomware or whatever. We have to take certain measures. And it all centers around two concepts. One concept is access, right? That most computers are connected to the internet. And that means your computer doesn't just see people in your home or in your office. It sees people all over the world, and that creates risk. And then the second thing is data. The data that we're storing on our computers. It's a lot different than back in the 1980s. If you had a computer in the 80s, you were largely a hobbyist, right? And maybe you're using it in a business, and so there was some kind of minor spreadsheet work or something like that. That was what most computers were used for back then. Today, we file our taxes on the computer. We enroll in college on the computer. We buy movie tickets. We order food. We do all of our shopping. We do all sorts of stuff via the computer, right? And that means all of that data about us is stored right there on the computer. And if somebody gains access to it, we end up with identity theft, where our personal information gets compromised, and now we've got to deal with that. It's a huge headache. It's worse than just losing your car keys, right, which is annoying. But having all of your personal information stolen, that's worse because you can't take it back. And a lot of that information you can't change. It's not like I'm going to go and change my name and change my fingerprints because my computer got broken into. So it kind of puts you into a corner. For businesses, it's even more true, right? Let's take, for example, I don't know, I think of like the food industry, right? Coca-Cola. Whether you like them or not, doesn't matter. They have a formula for making Coca-Cola, and it's a close guarded secret. I don't know how big of a secret it can be when they have these massive factories churning it out, but anyhow, apparently it's a secret, and they don't tell people the formula. I don't even know if they have it copyrighted or trademarked or whatever because it's such a secret, right? If hackers were to break in to their system and gain access to that formula for Coca-Cola. Think of the damage they could do. Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot of damage there, but competitors could use that to craft beverages that tasted similar, and now it affects their business. They could stick with the food theme, like Kentucky Fried Chicken, where they have their 20,
Original recipe.
What is it? 21 herbs and spices or something. If somebody knew that original recipe, then that's what's called intellectual property, right? There are a lot of businesses right now that function solely based on the value of their intellectual property. And if that value is lost, the company would go out of business, right? So companies have a need to defend that data. And I'm talking about companies. Let's go even crazier. Military, right? If you work for the military, just the fact that you have a soldier stationed in a particular city at a particular time, that basic data could put a life at risk, right? If attackers get that data and leak that out, that is data that needs to be protected. Now, in the case of the military, they know that, and they're protecting that data. They're working very hard on it. In the case of Coca-Cola and Kentucky Fried Chicken, they hopefully know the value of that, and they're working very hard to protect that data. But in the case of average John Smith and the tax records he's keeping on his laptop in his living room, it's not the same level of security. He's probably not thinking about that on a day-to-day basis. When it's a school teacher that's keeping track of grades for a student, they're not necessarily thinking about the IT security ramifications of that. But that's where we come in. As the IT technicians, the IT professionals, we have to step in and say, this data's got to be stored securely. It's got to be protected. It's got to be stored in a way that we can rely upon it and know that information is not going to get compromised. That's a really important thing to understand, just right here at the outset, that even benign data that seems very simple, can be used to potentially steal our information. If you were to walk up to me on the street today and say, Don, what was your first pet's name, right? In the olden days, I would gladly tell you about my first dog, who was a Sheltie, and I loved that dog. It was the greatest animal on the planet, and I miss him dearly. But I'm not going to say his name on the show. And the reason I'm not going to do that is not that it's some national secret, but because I've used that as a security question on various websites where, oh, you forgot your password. Okay, answer these questions. Where did you go to high school? What's your first pet's name? What's your mother's maiden name? All of a sudden, information like that we used to give out freely becomes something that can be used against us. And that's where we've got to have some basic measures in place for us personally, right? But also for our company. Companies have to have a security policy that defines what employees are allowed to do or not allowed to do, and to help educate those employees to make sure they know, because sometimes they just don't know. And if you walk up to somebody and you say, hey, when's your birthday? And they tell you the birthday, right? Most people will tell you the birthday. It's not that big of a deal. And then you say, oh, well, how old are you going to be? All right, well, if I know how old you are, and I know when your birthday is, then I can figure out exactly what your birth date is, right? It's just simple math. And once I have that birth date, that's used as a verification question at a lot of banks and a lot of other places, and we can start to get information. That process is what makes all of this so dangerous, right? And it's also kind of what creates the buzz and the hype around working in IT security. So when we talk about this for the whole rest of this episode, and really the whole security section, remember that the whole point of this is to protect that data and ultimately to protect our users. So everything in the security world needs to be built around that idea of protection. That's what it all boils down to.
Now, Don, as you say that, I'm starting to think of the very fact that there's so many companies out there and individuals that have different computer systems that are out there. Well, I can't, as an IT professional, be able to plan one system and secure that one without actually having to go and learn the other system and secure it as well. Are there some basic principles that we should use just in general then that can help us when there's so many diverse systems out there?
Absolutely, right? So let's say that I can only teach you one concept, right? I have a 2-minute show and I can only teach you this one concept. There's one simple concept in the world of IT security that you can apply across the board from the beginning to the end, and it's the idea of what's called the security triad. That IT security is built up of 3 pieces. That's why they say the triad. And each piece is responsible for a different aspect of security, right? So I've got it pulled up here. It's usually represented as a triangle, as triads, I guess, typically are. And we have these 3 things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. A lot of people abbreviate this down to the CIA triad, but that sounds a little shady and nefarious, like the Central Intelligence Agency. But it's got nothing to do, well, nothing specifically to do with the CIA. Each of these are different concepts of how we ensure security in a network. All right, confidentiality. If I have data, it's my data. I want to keep it secret. And if I want to share the data with somebody, I should be able to. But if I don't want to share data with somebody, I should be able to not share it, right? That's keeping information confidential. Integrity. If I choose to share data with somebody, I want them to know when they get it that it hasn't been tampered with, it hasn't been changed, that it's in the original form from when I sent it. And if they send me data, I want to know that data hasn't been tampered with, that it's in the original form that it was sent. That's called maintaining the integrity of data. And then availability. If I want to access that data right now, I should be able to access it. And if I want to access it tomorrow, I should be able to access it tomorrow. And the next day, I should be able to repeatedly access that information whenever I want, and it's available and ready for me to use it. All right. When we implement security procedures, policies, password requirements, backup systems, and so on, they're all designed to provide at least one of these three things. All right. The next time an IT security officer comes to you with a new policy and says, "For now on, you have to use this. You have to use a badge here. I'll show you like one. You have to use a little key to unlock your computer from now on, right?" Well, up until that day, they just had a username and password. But now all of a sudden you've got this little key, and this is actually attached to my belt. So this is, it was attached to my belt. This is what I use on my computer. So when I log in the morning, I don't just put in a username and a password. I also have to plug this key into my computer and gain access to it and hurt my hand. So, so why did they do that? Why did they ask me to do that? Well, let's look at the CIA triad and figure that out, okay? If I log into my computer and use a username and a password, somebody else could get my username and password, couldn't they? My username, well, that's pretty easy to figure out. Most companies just use your actual name, right? And if you know one person's name, you can figure it out. Or if you know their email address, almost everybody these days uses your email address as your username. Email address is on my business card. You can just look at my business card. Now you know my email address. So you got the username, the password. Maybe they could guess the password. Maybe they could figure it out. Maybe they could trick me into giving them the password. That would be bad, right? Maybe they know the name of my first pet, and they can use that to reset the password, and now they know my password. They could get at my data. That breaks confidentiality, right? If they can log in as me, they could start sending false data as me. That breaks integrity, right? The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't really mess with availability, right? If somebody's able to log in as me, I could still log in as me, right? Unless they reset my password, now I can't get in. That breaks availability. So that password compromise puts all three of these at risk. So they come in and they give me this key. And they say, "For now on, Don, in order to log in, you've got to do your username, password, and plug in this key." Well, now if somebody figures out my password, it's not enough. They can't log in as me. They don't have the key. Or if somebody steals my key, they can't log in as me. They don't have my password. They would have to have both, the password and the key, and then they could get in. So by making that harder, they can't log in as me. My data stays confidential. The only person who's logged in and sending data as me is me, because I have the key and the password, so that maintains integrity. And I know that somebody else can't get in there and reset my password because they don't have my key, so it maintains availability. This one solution, this one little key, met all three categories. It's not always like that. A lot of the stuff that we deploy only provides one. It might improve confidentiality, or it might improve integrity, it might improve availability, but not the others. So we have to keep that in mind, that all security is built around these three ideas. And I want to spend a little more time on each one because there's a lot of different solutions that fall under each category. But going back to what I said a moment ago, if I could only teach you one concept, it should be this: that when you're trying to secure your data, anything that you turn on, any button you switch or software you install or hardware you put in, you should look at this triad and say, okay, how does that help this? And if it doesn't help at least one of these three things, then you're wasting your time. There's something called security theater. I don't know if are you familiar with that term, Ronnie? Where people will do things that look secure, but aren't. All right, there's an old photograph that's been going around the internet forever. It's a parking lot, and it has the little arm that is blocking the road. So if you try and get in the parking lot, the arm has to come up for you to go in. But you can see road tracks where people have just been driving around it. It's security theater. That little arm didn't actually secure the parking lot at all. You can just drive right around it. There is a lot of that in IT. There are a lot of people that are taking steps that make you feel like it's more secure, but it's not actually improving any of these three things. So we need to map to that. Now, mapping to it, there's a ton of stuff we can do, and you can go a little too crazy. We can get so secure that it's unpleasant to use our computers, right? I think we probably all encountered that at some point. You go and work for a company that says you've got to reset your password every 30 days. That is so annoying, like to have a new password every 30 days, right? Well, I feel that way. A lot of other people feel that way. It does improve security, right? If an attacker figures out your password, they've only got it for a maximum of 30 days. But did it really improve security? If they got your password, they don't need 30 days to get all the information they want. And the attacker can reset your password just as easy as you can if they're already in. So in a way, doing password resets that frequently doesn't really improve security. So you've got to find a balance. You got to find a balance between customer usability or just end user usability and security. And that's all a balance here between these three things that we're trying to provide as we secure our infrastructure.
All right, Don, as we focus in on this idea of confidentiality as we see here, can you give us some examples of what we're really concerned about or the idea of what people are doing to bypass confidentiality?
Absolutely, yeah. So confidentiality. I have data, and I don't want anybody else to get it, okay? Well, how can somebody get my data? They could be sophisticated hackers. They could be the most brilliant technological mind and attack via the network and so on. But it's not normally that hard. It's usually pretty easy to get somebody's data. In fact, you don't even need a computer. If I want to get somebody's data and I know that that person prints things out a lot, I don't need their laptop. I don't need their network. I need their trash can. I can just wait till the end of the day when they walk away from their desk and I can go grab everything out of their trash can. Odds are they printed out some of the data I wanted and dropped it right in the can. I didn't need a password for that. I didn't need hacking skills and tools. You just go to the trash can, right? Let me show you an example of security that can help with stuff like this. Sometimes it's really, really simple. What I have here, this is a 3M screen filter, right? These are really popular because if you travel, I travel a lot. You get on an airplane, you fire up your laptop. Well, you get stuck in a middle seat because that's how airlines work. And two people who miraculously didn't get stuck in a middle seat somehow are sitting on each side of you. They can look at your screen. They can see exactly what you're doing. Well, you can have a privacy filter like this. When somebody's using a computer and someone else looks and sees what they're doing, it's called shoulder surfing. They're looking over your shoulder. It's not sophisticated. It's just, oh, look, that person has a computer. What are they doing, right? Oh, they got a spreadsheet. That's kind of neat. What kind of information do they have? So there's technologies like these screen filters. And let me show you this one because it's kind of neat. So here's the screen filter. And if I hold it in front of my face or whatever, you can see through it, right? But if I was at an angle, so let's say you were sitting to the left or right of me, as I turn this to an angle, look what happens. It blacks out, right? There's little louvers and cantilevers inside of this so that when you're at a 45-degree angle, or I think it actually starts around 30 degrees, that it just blacks out. So now the person to your left or right is wondering why you're sitting there typing on a laptop that's turned off. and meanwhile, you are sitting there using the laptop and it's just fine. And it does create a little bit of a shade effect on your screen, so it's almost like wearing sunglasses. But the trade-off is you get great security as far as shoulder surfing. Now, it's not perfect. I was telling Ronnie a story before the show. I saw someone on an airplane that had a filter just like this, and they sat in front of me. And because I was directly behind them, I could see the screen just fine, right? The people to the left and right, they couldn't, right? They would get that blocking effect. But for somebody sitting directly behind, this just dims the screen a bit and doesn't necessarily improve security. So we always have to be aware of that sometimes we can try and take steps to make information confidential, but if it's not implemented correctly, or if we don't think all the way through of all the different use case scenarios, it may not actually provide the security that we want, all right? A great example of that is encryption. If I want to keep my data private, right? I want my data to be private, So I'm going to encrypt it. I want it to be hidden and stored away. All right. Well, for example, let me show you here my laptop. So this is my laptop. It's my actual laptop that I use for work and here on the show. I have data on here that I was about to say I have data on here that I wouldn't want to get out, but I don't think I actually do. I think I just have show notes and stuff. But let's pretend that I did. So my tax returns are right here. I don't want that to get out. Okay, well, my system is encrypted. This is a MacBook, and Apple has some software. Whoops, if I get in here, they have some software that's called FileVault. And what FileVault does is FileVault encrypts your hard drive. So see how it's telling me right here, FileVault is turned on for the disk Macintosh HD and a recovery key has been set. My hard drive is encrypted, all right? Which means if I leave my laptop at an airport or if somebody steals my laptop and runs away with it, they could turn it on, but unless they know my password, they can't unlock it and all of my data is encrypted. If they knew my password, they could punch it in, it would unlock the laptop, and now my data is decrypted. But I know my data is safe. It's confidential, even if someone steals my laptop because it's encrypted. Now, as with all security, there's a flaw here, right? The flaw is my laptop is protected until I put in my password. When I put in my password, now everything's unlocked, right? And so then I can come in here and I can browse my hard drive and I can access my files, and I don't even realize it's encrypted because at this point it's all being decrypted. I'm able to browse in and access my information, right? Well, let's say I come in the morning, I turn on my computer, I log in, and then I say, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee. And I walk away to get a cup of coffee. I've already unlocked my computer. Anybody could walk up, sit down at the computer, and now they've got access to my data unencrypted, right? It's not a perfect system. It's not one thing we can deploy by itself. We need to deploy it in conjunction with something else, right? In this case, if I remember to lock my screen when I walk away, all right? So if I'm gonna walk away, I just kind of have this memorized Control-Command-Q. On Windows, it's the Windows key L. If you hit Windows key L, it locks your screen. On a Mac, where everything's supposed to be easy, it's Control-Command-Q. So I can just hit that and I can walk away. Well, now my screen is locked. If somebody wants to get in and use my system, they're going to have to punch in my password, all right? If they know my password, they can get in, and there they go, right? And now all my data is decrypted. But if they don't know my password, they could steal the laptop, but all the data is encrypted. They can't access it. That's a decent solution. But it depends on me remembering to lock the screen, okay? What if I don't remember to lock the screen? Well, what I could configure is a screensaver, right? And screensavers, we don't really need screensavers anymore. Computer screens don't burn in like they used to. You can have the same image for days at a time and it won't burn in. But screensavers are still useful because what you can do is when you configure a screensaver, you can tell it that after the screensaver kicks in to lock the screen and require a password. And that way, if I walk away, after a couple of minutes, the screen will lock, and then if somebody else tries to use it, they can't get in, right? It's an extra step. This is all stuff that a regular end user isn't going to worry about. They're not going to think about things like this. It's up to us as IT professionals to step in and say, all right, here's a protection mechanism. Here's a weakness or what's called a vulnerability in that protection. How can I fix that? How can I correct it to maintain my end user's security, their information? So keeping that data confidential. There's other things to remember about this, like sometimes the best way to keep data protected and keep it confidential is to destroy it, right? That if I'm done with some data, I don't want to just drop it in a trash can. Somebody could get that. I want to make sure it gets destroyed. And there's a few different ways to go about that. Let's talk about mechanical disks for a moment, right? Mechanical disks. So this is a hard drive that would be inside of your computer. Some systems have SSD now, but most systems still have spinning disks like this, where they have a platter and a mechanical arm that's using a magnetic signal to basically write ones and zeros to that platter. Well, once that data is written, even if you delete the data, remnants of it are left behind. And it's kind of like the old game where if you write on a piece of paper and you throw it away, the piece of paper underneath it still has an imprint of what you were writing. That's kind of how hard drives are. That data gets left behind. And so you might have a blank drive, and then you write something on it. Like here, I wrote the word dictionary, okay? And then over time, I delete it, but it's still kind of there. It's just marked as deleted. And then I write new data, and that data gets layered on top. And then more data, and then more data, right? And so it gets to a point where there's no way I can tell what was originally written on there. If I didn't know that it said dictionary originally, I would have no idea that's what it said now, right? But there's forensic software that does a really good job of breaking this down, getting at that information. And so if we want to ensure that data is no longer necessary, if we have an old laptop that we're getting rid of, we don't want to just sell that laptop on eBay. A random person buys it, and now they've got access to all the data that you had on that laptop, right? So we want to make sure that data gets purged off. And the only way to really guarantee it is to destroy that data. Now, when we're talking about paper data, that means going through a shredder, right? You drop the paper in a shredder, paper gets destroyed, that's the end of the story, right? Well, I mean, guys, somebody could glue this together. So with hard drives, they have software versions of shredders where you can run a software utility that'll write data over and over and over again to the disk to make it where you can't recover the data. But in high security environments like military and intelligence, in those areas, they don't even trust that. And they actually use, well, shredders, but not like this. Shredders like this, right? These are industrial shredders that can grind up a physical hard drive like it was nothing, and now there's no way to recover that data that's off of there. You'd be surprised the amount of data they can recover from an old hard drive, even if you've deleted it and formatted it and overwritten it. There's still traces left behind of that data, and it can be reassembled. It's actually a bit of a science to it, but you'll see where there's cybersecurity forensics analysts, and that's what they do. That's their specialty, is recovering data that people would generally assume is completely lost. So, so those are some aspects of confidentiality. Obviously, there's a lot more, right? We need to understand that just because we own a laptop, that we have to do what's called tempering our expectation of privacy. That you're using your laptop, that's great. But the moment you browse to a website, you're actually passing through a number of routers that are owned by other companies you don't even know. You're passing through other servers and other systems and a lot of things in between. And I want to show you an example of that. I know I kind of went a little long on some of this. So, Ronnie, can we do a part two on this one?
Let's do a part two.
Let's do a part two, because I want to show you that when you use Facebook, when you use Gmail or somebody like that, there's so many companies involved in that communication that you cannot trust that data is going to be kept confidential and safe. So I want to show you that chain. We'll do that in part two. And then I didn't even get to the other two of the triad, right? So we need to talk about integrity and availability as well. So definitely stay tuned for that.
All right, Don. Well, thank you again for helping us to understand at least this. And you want to stay around for that part two. Don left us with a cliffhanger. That means you got to come back. So this is a great place for us to sign off. For IT Pro TV, I'm your host, Ronnie Wong.
And I'm Don Pizzette.
Stay tuned right here for more of your CompTIA IT Fundamental Show.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.